Let's say they're able to be a little bit more calm through these situations, right? And even if they do nothing else, like their team picks up on that. Like interpersonal dynamics are really obvious to people, like unconsciously, if you will. So it rubs off on the team.
It is Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast, helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm Russell Lolliker, your host, communications and leadership expert with a couple of successful decades of experience in both those areas, and a whole heap of curiosity, just like you, on how we can make the workplace a better place. Today is Wednesday. We are diving into more on high-pressure jobs. What is a high-pressure jobs? Well, intense demands, tight deadlines, significant responsibilities that lead to stress, lead to burnout. How do we handle all this? Well, Monday and Tuesday, we talked about defining high pressure roles. Tuesday, we talked about how we as leaders can better handle high pressure, whether that's coming externally or internally. And today, we're going to jump into high pressure when it relates to our team, how we interact with them, how we can help build a better environment, how we can tackle that high pressure, that interpersonal relationship work that we need to do with our team members. Dr. Janna Koretz has been our guest this week. She's going to help us with our relationship with our team when it comes to leading through high pressure roles. Hold on. Well, you bring a good point. You're going back to, as a leader that is high pressure, but they're getting the help to manage this high pressure. Guess what their team is not doing? Also taking that learning. So, or their bosses or their colleagues. So how does a leader go back, working on themselves, getting their self-awareness of how to manage that stress back into their team who are not learning the same things? How did they approach that?
That's a big task. And I think that's a roadblock a lot of people run into. And I think it depends also where you are in the organization as well, of how to go about doing that. But I think this is true for, in my opinion, leadership in general, leading by example is very powerful. And I think that leading by relationship is important, and being appropriately open when you feel like that's helpful is useful. And so I think, and also if you think about, this is a silly example, it's like the boss who comes back from vacation and they're like a little more relaxed, and then 2 days later they're back to what they were doing. But I think like that first day back, I think we see a little bit of that more like from a longevity perspective when people like they're having these shifts. And so I'm just using calm as an example, but let's say they're able to be a little bit more calm through these situations, right? And even if they do nothing else, like their team picks up on that. Like interpersonal dynamics are really obvious to people, like unconsciously, if you will. So it rubs off on the team. And then on top of that, if you're helping two people on your team navigate a conflict and they're in your office, let's say, you're like, okay, well, when you're calm, right? You're co-regulating with them. It's what you do with children. And then so they were like, oh, I don't actually have to be angry about this. We can just have a conversation. And here's how we do that. Oh, okay. Like that's actually better. It's easier. And so then, you're teaching skills as they come up. You're also teaching them by just being yourself. And then if you want to make a more conscious effort, you can then implement things that you are learning from a cultural perspective that's just much harder and takes a lot longer and requires a lot of buy-in and stuff like that.
Where does communication come into this? Because in a high pressure situation, you're probably being very quick, short bursts, because it's all about emergency. It's all about addressing things right away. But if you're trying to get out of that mindset, even in that environment, communications with our teams and our colleagues might need to shift as well. What does that look like?
Well, first, I like to tell people you need to decide what's urgent and what's important, because a lot of things are not urgent, but we treat them like they are. And so that gets like everyone all frazzled, making these quips at each other, like all these things. But really, yes, okay, so we have those situations, but those are actually pretty small in number, especially if you're doing your job right. And so, and that I say that there are some caveats to that, of course, but in a lot of times that's true. But also, and this has been a personal journey for me as well, like I'm a very direct person. I am a really reactive person. And so when I started leading people and being a leader, I had to stop doing that, because what I quickly realized is that was not helpful to myself or to other people. or to my organization, because most people don't hear directness well, especially if it's not 100% positive. And so what I had to start doing is saying, yes, I hear you. I appreciate what you're saying. This is what I'm hearing you say. Let me think about that. I'll get back to you by the end of the day. This person would leave, and then I would be able to like rant in my head about it, call a friend, whatever, and then think about, okay, what is the problem I need to solve? What is the outcome I need? And how am I going to talk to that person to get that outcome? I do not want to get in my own way. And so how do I do that? And that line of communication, as a therapist, I can do that. But for many people, they need to be taught how to do that, because it's hard to communicate with people, especially when you guys are on different pages. Or for example, a lot of people say, I have this really difficult coworker. They're very rigid. Okay, well, they could just be a rigid person, or they're probably really anxious. And if you think about them as an anxious person and communicate with them that way, let's see how does that help your relationship, or how does that help you get things done? And oftentimes it's really helpful, because that person doesn't then become defensive, because they're being spoken to. Oh yeah, that is really hard. Here's some options. What do you think? It feels more collaborative, whatever the communication shift is. Right. So it's also how it's like theory of mind. It's how you understand people. It's giving people the benefit of the doubt. It's understanding your own reactions. And then the actual language that you want to use is a lot of what we teach people. I mean, there's some key phrases, like it's very therapist-y. I'm wondering if is a great way to start talking, because you're not saying one thing. I'm wondering if is very like disarming, right? So there are like phrases such as that we teach people, but we're also teaching them about other people, and we're teaching them other things, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I will use a Mike Tyson quote, because it's the best.
Love Mike Tyson quotes. He has some really good ones.
It's great to have a plan until you get punched in the face.
Until punched in the face. That's a favorite quote of mine. I love that quote.
And this sounds all great, but I know there are people going, I am too busy for this. I don't have time to think about, I'm wondering if. I'm like, I am having to put out 17 fires, and you want me to take a step back? I have to lead through a fire, figuratively or reality. How do you talk to people like that?
Yes. I mean, that's all true. And it all depends on how you want things to be different. You have to do things differently. And no one has the time for that. I hear all this all the time with somebody with young kids. Like, there are all these books about how you talk to young kids, right? And one of the things they tell you is you're supposed to be funny and like playful, and everything's supposed to be a joke, and the monster's coming to eat your socks or whatever. And that's how every parent is. No one has the time for this. I need them in the car. I don't need this bullshit, whatever. But in the end of the day, like, if you just do that, your kids will be in the car in 5 seconds, and then it's all over. No one's mad. No one's angry. You're actually saving time. And I think the same thing applies to the workplace when you do things differently. Like, you just want people to go away and do their job. I understand that, but they're not. Right? And so how do you, as a leader, get them to do that so that everyone's happy, nobody's quitting, you're not paying for new people, you're making more money, no one's losing their job, all the things. And it does, as a leader, it requires you to be different. It requires you to do things that are irritating. It requires you to take a step back and do things differently, because otherwise you're getting in your own way. And that's why they come to us in the first place. Mm-hmm. So no, you don't really have time, but you don't really have a choice. And that's just like where we all kind of land. And it doesn't have to necessarily be this giant shift all the time. You don't have to be everyone's friend and be like really therapist-y with them all the time. But there are moments that you'll learn to do that, which are really helpful. And that actually buys you a lot of grace in all the times that you don't do it, because you're not going to do it all the time. Parents are not always going to be like, whatever. Eventually one day you lose your shit and you're like, get in the fucking car, right? And so it's no different at work. It's like the more times you don't do that, the more efficient everything is, the happier people are, and then the less people are upset when you don't do it.
That's it. Another episode is done of Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I hope you join us tomorrow. This week's been a real great one. We've got into defining things, relationship with ourselves, relationship with our teams, and then there's that thing we can't control, culture. We can influence, we can be aware of it, but I'm talking culture or the many subcultures within an organization that we have to work within. And sometimes there's alignment, sometimes there's not. So what do we do? Well, our guest, Dr. Janna Koretz, is going to help us navigate that a little bit and think a little differently. And I hope you join us for the final piece of our conversation puzzle on high-pressure jobs. That's coming up tomorrow. And if you're enjoying these more targeted episodes, Monday through Thursday, we get a little bit more into the around 10 to 15 minute target of our conversation, which is obviously part of a larger conversation through the week. But these are a little bit more impactful, a little bit more valuable, a little less time consuming. I hope you've been enjoying them. And if you think others will find value, pass it along. Just a little email, just a little note in Messenger, just a little text message. Hey, you know what? I know you're a leader that is growing, that is trying to be better, and this is a show that might help you with that. Yeah, thank you. Please spread the word of this little show. Anyway, thank you so much for being a part of it, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.